MBTA.org.
I'm Abdallah Fayyad. Tonight on Greater Boston, Mayor Michelle Wu joins me to talk about the Sumner Tunnel closure, worsening traffic across the city, and how the ever-embattled MBTA is playing into it all. Plus, a bill on Beacon Hill aims to do away with the statute of limitations for civil lawsuits in cases involving the sexual abuse of children. The bill's sponsored, and a child sex abuse survivor turned advocate join me ahead. It's shaping up to be a congested summer here in Boston, so if you think the traffic on your commute is bad now, you should know it's about to get much worse. In just a couple weeks, the Sumner Tunnel is set to close for nearly 2 months, and transportation officials are hoping commuters will heed their warnings to ditch their cars and opt for public transportation instead. They're hoping to divert as many of the roughly 39,000 drivers that pass through the tunnel every day as possible, as experts anticipate it'll take commuters an extra hour to get where they're going by car. As part of that effort, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation announced that both the Blue Line and the East Boston Ferry will be free for riders during the nearly 2-month shutdown. But MBTA slow zones, service cuts, and station infrastructure issues are doing little to ease commuters' concerns. Joining me now to discuss is Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, along with Globe transportation reporter Taylor Dolven. Taylor, Mayor Wu, thanks so much for joining me today. Mayor Wu, I want to start with you. Last year, we had something similar happen with the Orange Line shutdown, and on short notice, the city implemented a transportation network of makeshift bus lanes, bike lanes, and to alleviate the potential traffic that was anticipated from that shutdown. Is your administration doing anything similar for the Sumner closure this summer?
We've had a little bit more time to plan on this one. It was just about 2 weeks notice with the Orange Line shutdown, so that was quite intense. But here, it's been many months of conversation, and it won't be easy because unlike the Orange Line where there were 2 ways, you could either go underground or you could try to get through above ground. The tunnel is the tunnel, and the other mechanisms to get over or through or under the water are quite cumbersome. So I'm very glad that the administration has been so responsive in heeding the call and request for other alternatives to be more accessible. The free Blue Line will go a long way, and I know they're working to try to ensure that there's mitigation in other ways, the free ferry service as well on the water. So every possible route that can help provide relief is being implemented and trying to be expanded.
And can I ask, do you think this is an opportunity to convince people to get out of their cars longer term, even after the tunnel reopens?
It's the hope. For me, there's 2 lessons here. One is that our infrastructure in a historic city, many of those bills are coming due in terms of delayed and deferred maintenance that is now at the point of crumbling and being physically dangerous for people, whether it is on our tracks and transportation infrastructure in the subway or tunnels, bridges, roads, some of the pipes and water as well. We have a lot of work to do, and each of these mechanisms represents an opportunity to think about how we're actually making those generational investments in making more modes accessible, or even reminding ourselves of the maintenance that has to go alongside all of the new investments that are being made, so we're not recreating this situation down the line. And then the other lesson is that we do have to activate multiple ways to get where we need to go. If any single one of them has some barrier or situation comes up for maintenance or needing a fix, having that plan for water transportation to be expanded all across the various routes in the Inner Harbor, or having a commitment to be able to turn on and off ways to ease the financial barrier for residents. We've seen the impact on the bus line, and now we'll get to see it on the subway as well.
Taylor, your reporting has shed light on the transportation woes around Boston. Article after article shows us, what is going on. Can you give us a little bit of a sense of, how Boston fares compared to peer cities when it comes to transit infrastructure and preparing for the future?
Yeah, as the mayor mentioned, our transit system, specifically the MBTA subway system, is old. It's the oldest in the country. So maintaining it over lots and lots of years has been a challenge. And I think now we're seeing some of those problems really rear their heads. And when we have parts of stations collapsing, tracks in disrepair, needing maintenance. So it's not, specifically unique to the MBTA, but there's certainly that challenge. I also think, sometimes it's not just infrastructure, right? It's staffing, which has been a really big challenge at the MBTA specifically. We've seen the MBTA really fall behind other agencies when it comes to hiring, for example, bus drivers to be able to restore service. So, those are things I'm watching and, challenges that are certainly not unique to the T, but seem to be plaguing it, ongoing plaguing.
Mayor Wu, you recently sent the city budget back to the city council. One of the issues with that budget, it seemed like, was there wasn't enough transportation funds. Are you feeling confident that you'll have enough money for transportation in the year ahead?
We are a week to go in the budget cycle before the deadline. So our hope is that the budget we have sent back represents a healthy investment while being fiscally responsible. Do we have enough funding for transportation? No. I mean, the scale of what needs to be done across electrification, across expansion of services, even just on what is under city jurisdiction alone, we could do a whole lot more. We've actually changed the approach that city government is taking. Previously, the most that we would do if everyone on a street agreed might be to add a speed hump or put up a stop sign. What ended up happening very often is that even if traffic was calmed or slowed on that street, it would get pushed over to a neighboring side street or the one next to that. And so we're really taking much more of a zone by zone planning approach to think about all the ways in which traffic flow, multimodal access for bicyclists, pedestrians, and public transit all fit together. And so what we're calling a safety surge citywide is meant to really focus on how to ensure all of our streets are safe, that we can keep people getting to where they need to go, but that it is not sacrificing the health and lives of those who are using our roads, not in vehicles.
And Taylor, how do you feel about the traffic problems overall? Do you feel, is it worsening? Is this something that you think is just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse because of the problems that you outlined with the MBTA?
I think fundamentally, if we want people to give up their cars, the other modes need to be able to compete with the convenience of a car. So, for example, to get from the Globe offices today to the studio we're in now is about a 4-mile trip, and Google Maps showed me it's a 14-minute drive or a 55-minute trip on the MBTA. For someone who has the time to be able to do that and can save some money, that option is there. But if we're going to really get those, choice riders, people who can make either decision, transit and cycling and walking really have to be able to compete with driving. And I think that's where the challenge is.
And Mayor Wu, when it comes to the problems of the MBTA, that's obviously not your responsibility. It's a state agency, but you are the mayor of the city that it serves. I wanted to ask you, since Governor Healy has taken over and there's been a new manager at the MBTA, has your partnership with them improved from the prior administration? We are,
as you say, even though it's not directly within our control, although we are lobbying very vociferously for a seat on the MBTA governance board for the city of Boston and are seeing some progress in terms of inclusion of that item in the state legislature's budget this year. Everything that we do depends on people being able to get around. We have seen news of residents moving out of the state or people who are working in downtown Boston not coming back in person as many days or at all. And what I hear from employer after employer and groups of employees when I get the chance to meet with the workforce is that a lot of it's the housing crisis and it's our transportation infrastructure. These two are the make or break issues that are confronting our entire region right now and certainly the city. And so we intend to be as involved as we can, as strong of a partner as possible on transportation. What we're doing to supplement and complement and collaborate with the MBTA has been building over the 18 months that I've had the honor to be in this role, created dedicated staffing to focus on partnering with the MBTA. There are now standing meetings on a variety of issues from snow plowing to coordinating on dedicated bus lanes and how the planning for that happens. And so we see this as intricately intertwined, and our goal is to stay as heavily involved in public transportation as we can be, because that's what our residents need.
And do you think you have a cooperative partner in Governor Healy? Do you think that she is putting enough pressure on the MBTA to deliver on what it needs to the residents here?
I do, and the governor knows that I'm just obsessed with wanting to make sure our transportation system works. And so it's often the first thing that she'll mention to me when I run into her. The general manager is settling in. We've had very productive conversations with him and with his team already. And we're down in the weeds on many of these items. It's everything from traffic and congestion on our streets and the functioning of our downtown economy, to, in some ways, micro issues such as whether the new potential O'Brien School moving to West Roxbury could be served by the commuter rail lines that are already running directly next to the school. So the infrastructure is there, even if the access is not yet there. And how do we plan a couple years into the future? So we've put a lot on their plate, and we're eager to step up and offer as much as we can in partnership.
Taylor, you wrote an article that mentioned another reason why people should get out of their cars, and that is that there are a lot of pedestrian deaths in the U.S., and Boston is not necessarily an outlier. So, you know, how bad is it when it comes to pedestrian safety in Boston and Massachusetts?
Yeah, but the U.S. overall and Massachusetts are certainly trending in the wrong direction. When you look at other developed countries, since over the last few decades, most of those countries have been in a downward trend, steadily reducing the number of people who die in car accidents, whether that's people driving cars, passengers, pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists. And so, it's a really unique to the U.S. in that way. And so, experts say that one of the top things that needs to happen in cities and states and across the country is enforcement. And so I know that's something that the city has pushed for. Right now, the city doesn't have the ability to implement something called automatic enforcement, which would be, speed or red light cameras, trying that out and seeing how it works. Boston, just looking at the data last year compared to this year, it seems like may actually be trending in the right direction. And so I've talked to the chief of streets about this, and it's sort of too early to say what's working there, but certainly the state and the country have a long way to go in that regard.
Mayor Wu, I want to close out with you. You've been a big advocate for free transit. Yeah, 2 free bus pilots under your leadership have yielded good results so far, preliminary. Are you hoping the free Blue Line and the free ferry kind of show people the benefits of free transit? What are you hoping to get out of this?
The proof points are there, and we're eager to see them applied across any part of the system. Even during the Orange Line shutdown, when the bike share system, our blue bikes, were free for all, we set and then broke 9 different records for usage in just that 30-day period. And so, would I love to see more validation? Absolutely. Fundamentally, though, this is about trying to mitigate what will be immense inconvenience and frustration for our residents. This is also an area of the city where they're very transit dependent as well, many working class families. And so the ridership of the Blue Line actually has made a much stronger recovery to pre-pandemic ridership levels, even compared to the other subway lines. People are using it already, and we want to make sure that everyone knows it is a resource, and that there are alternatives to be able to have people still be able to go through their daily lives as this is shut down over the summer.
Mayor Wu, Taylor Dolven, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Next up, most survivors of childhood sexual abuse don't come forward about what happened to them until decades later, if ever. In fact, the average survivor doesn't speak up until age 52, according to the organization Child USA, often too late to take their abuser to court. In this state, survivors must file a lawsuit within 35 years of their abuse or within 7 years after discovering emotional or psychological damage caused by it. But a bill before the legislature aims to get rid of that statute of limitations altogether. I'm joined by the lawmaker behind it, State Senator Joan Lovely, and Kathryn Robb, Executive Director of Child USA's advocacy branch, Child USAdvocacy. Senator Lovely, Kathryn, thanks so much for joining me. Senator, I wanted to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what this bill does exactly and why you felt the need to bring it forward today?
Well, thank you. Yes. And actually, what it would do is completely eliminate the statute of limitation on the civil side for claims of sexual abuse against both individuals and institutions whose negligent supervision led to the sexual abuse of children. So against the individual and any institution who was overseeing children and there was negligent supervision that led to an employee, a contract laborer, whoever might be associated with that institution, whether it's a school, a youth serving organization, a church, whatever it might be, so that the survivor could bring an action at any time in their lifetime.
Kathryn, can I ask you, based on your advocacy work, working with survivors, what does this bill mean for survivors?
Well, it means that the truth can come out. And it also means that children are safer. I talk to survivors all over the country, sometimes all over the world. I speak to someone new almost every week. I hear the exact same thing, and it's this. I just don't want this to happen to another kid. And so I think when we pass this type of legislation, which we've been doing all over the country, survivors not only have some sense of accountability and justice, but they have a sense of relief that finally their lawmakers are paying attention to the data and doing something about it and holding institutions and perpetrators accountable.
Senator, can I ask you, why did you focus this bill on civil cases as opposed to criminal cases when it comes to the statute of limitations?
Well, I did file a bill actually on the criminal side as well. It's a little more difficult to move that. We had actually done some statute of limitation reform here in Massachusetts back in 2014 when we raised the age to 53. But I was new to the legislature. I was in my first term then. I followed this closely, but I always wondered what was the magic age of 53. It was a negotiation actually at the time that was agreed upon to raise that to the age of 53. I don't think that there should be any age. It should be based on evidence and to be able to bring an action. And it should be retroactive. It shouldn't be for actions that going forward. It should be for actions that are older. For instance, for example, I am a survivor of child sexual abuse at the age of 6. I did not meet that age 53. I was older than that when we passed this law back in 2014, but that wasn't about me. This is about the so many survivors, as Kathryn had stated, who have come forward. And we listen to these survivors. We're advocating on behalf of these survivors. And for those who have the courage to be able to bring an action, they should be able to do so.
Can I ask, would this potentially run into any problems from the Supreme Court precedent about applying these laws retroactively when it comes to repealing statutes of limitations?
If I could jump in there, Senator. So yep. The highest court in Massachusetts has already determined that this is constitutional. So we have a very good case, the Sliney case. And our Supreme Judicial Court has ruled that it is in fact constitutional, and lawmakers have the authority and power to pass legislation that protects our children.
And one thing that I'm sure you've heard from skeptics, is that the reason statutes of limitations exist is because evidence over time erodes, becomes less reliable. What would you say to those skeptics who worry that defendants might have to or might face unfair jury trials?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, we have the rules of civil procedure. We have the rules of evidence, and they are safety nets, right? Plaintiffs have to survive a 12B motion. And I think most importantly, I think what your listeners should know is that these are not your typical torts. These are not a slip and fall case. This is not a fender bender case. These are very, very different. These are the type of torts that are horrendous. And the very act by the perpetrator silences the victim. And we believe that perpetrators should not be rewarded for the silence they create in their victims. That's just not good public policy, nor does it protect our children moving forward.
Kathryn, you also mentioned that you hear across the country when you talk to people that what they really want is for this to never happen to anybody else. Obviously, on top of accountability for perpetrators, one thing that survivors of child sexual assault often face are law enforcement failures to properly document these crimes. Do you think there's room for any legislation or anything to accompany this bill to bolster law enforcement and improve those or correct those failures on the part of law enforcement when it comes to reporting these crimes?
Well, let me say this much. There's always room for improvement. We can always do better when it comes to protecting our children. But I have to share that our criminal system has limitations that our civil system doesn't have. And this is why we've passed revival legislation in 26 states and 3 U.S. territories already. So the vast majority of states are moving in this direction. And what I mean when I say there are limitations in the criminal side, we have a higher burden of proof. Less than 10% of claims that are reported ever end up moving forward to prosecution, and about a little less than that end in a conviction. So because of the structure, and also our constitutional rights of ex post facto and all of that, there are just limitations in the criminal side. And I might add that when was the last time you saw an institution go to jail, right? I mean, really the way institutions change and protect children is when they know that they will be held accountable. We saw this in the Sackler family, Purdue Pharma. We see it all the time across for all other sorts of wrongs, that the only way bad actors will clean up their acts is to by the threat of civil litigation. And that's the power of our civil system, right? And certainly we should have that power used to protect our children.
Senator, I wanted to ask you about the reception this has gotten on Beacon Hill. What have you heard from your colleagues? Do you feel confident that this is something that the legislature can pass?
So this is a refile. We have filed this in the past. It has received hearings. We've had very strong testimony, very powerful testimony from a lot of survivors who come in and share very detailed stories of when they were children, how they were sexually abused, and why they think that this legislation is so important. And so I have talked to many of my colleagues. I have the ear of leadership who is looking at this and other bills that I have filed to be able to, again, put more layers of protection in for our children. Currently, according to the CDC, across the country, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys experience sexual abuse in childhood. Those numbers are staggering. And 90% of survivors don't come forward again until about the age of 48 to 53. When the statute of limitations has usually run on, certainly on the criminal side and perhaps on the civil side. We want to make sure that people have the opportunity to be able to bring an action when they are ready to do so.
Kathryn, I wanted to ask you, you've mentioned that you're an outspoken survivor of child sexual abuse. I think one thing that people often, struggle with is understanding why it takes people so long to confront the trauma that they hold. Can you talk a little bit about why people take so long to come forward?
Sure. I was abused as a little girl for about 8 years by a family member, which, by the way, is the biggest pocket of where abuse occurs. Just shame, embarrassment, trauma. The nature of trauma can really silence kids. And I think when it happens in the family as well as in a church setting, where those trusted adults are someone that are revered in the neighborhood or revered by your family members. So it becomes really difficult to indict that particular person. And I think just overall shame, embarrassment, and trauma. We now understand the nature of trauma and what it does to the brains of young children.
And Senator, I just have one last question for you. This bill obviously focuses on child sexual assault. When it comes to adults who face sexual assault too, is there something that you think needs to be done there when it comes to the statute of limitations?
I do. I believe that there should not be a statute of limitations based on these crimes, and certainly on the civil side. It should be up to the victim, who I refer to as a survivor, that they should be able to bring an action when they are ready to bring an action. I can't bring an action. My perpetrator is dead. But that shouldn't preclude anybody from being able to bring an action when they are ready. This is so rampant. 90% of, as I said, 90% of abuse goes unreported because people can't admit to it or come to terms with it until they're well into adulthood. And they have faced a tremendous amount of trauma, as Kathryn had said, including drug abuse, alcohol abuse, so suicide. It's really, really critical that we bring this to the floor. I'm talking to many of my colleagues. Colleagues have shared with me that they are also survivors of sexual abuse. They have not made that known, and I would not make that known. But people are they feel encouraged that this is being discussed. There's a tremendous, as Kathryn said, there's still a tremendous amount of stigma. We have to break that down. We have to talk about this, and we have to take action.
Senator, Kathryn, thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you
for having us.
That's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm Abdallah Fayyad. Thanks for watching. Good night.
There is something really